Okay. All right. So, um, I was going to talk about Greentown Glass, and I don't know how many of you might be familiar with Greentown Glass and what it is. And I need to state that while I have a nice little collection of Greentown Glass, I am by no means an advanced collector. There are times that I will see something and not be 100% sure if it was made by Greentown. There were also a number of reproductions, which I'll mention briefly at the end. Um, and so, like I said, this is just kind of an introductory thing. I'm not an advanced person by any stretch of the imagination. So we're going to talk about Greentown Glass here. Um, all right. So when we talk about this, Greentown is actually a small town in Howard County, Indiana, which is just north of Indianapolis by, just over an hour's drive, I guess, up US 31. And it's due east of Kokomo. Most people have heard of Kokomo, and not the song by the Beach Boys. This is the actual town in Indiana. But there was a factory in Greentown, and it started out as the factory for the Indiana Tumbler and Goblet Company. And after a few years, it actually became a factory within the National Glass Company. And so we're going to talk about that. And if you can see, um, I have a picture, or I have a picture here of the state of Indiana where Howard County is highlighted in orange there. And I've drawn a green circle around that. And that goes back to Indiana's glass history because at one point in time, and thankfully, the Museum of American Glass in West Virginia was able to reproduce a book that was put together by a gentleman from Paris, Illinois. I don't remember his name off the top of my head. And he was able to go through and document every glass factory that ever existed in the state of Indiana. And at one point in time, or according to his book, there were over 200 glass factories that operated within the state at various times through glassmaking history in Indiana. They all did not make tableware, such as what many of us collect. There were window glass companies. There were companies that focused only on bottles. There's companies like the Ball Brothers Company, which made canning jars, those types of things. But and one of the reasons why there were so many factories in Indiana was because in the late 1800s, a large deposit of natural gas was found in north central Indiana and back over into Ohio. And like I said, that green circle kind of highlights the area of Indiana that I'm talking about. Um, so this was in the 1880s, early 1880s that this gas was discovered. And so there was a big rush at that point in time to get find industry that could use this gas and be productive with it. And glass seemed to be a natural one, so they went with that. Um, Now, this gas boom lasted, like I said, the early 1880s into the early 1900s. Probably by 1915 or so, it was gone because the people just didn't use this natural gas supply carefully enough. They there were towns up there that they used it for their street lights, only they left them running all the time. So, they just did things. They didn't reserve their resources properly to make them last as long as possible. It's a finite resource anyway. So, um, so that's kind of why there were glass factories initially in the state of Indiana. And so that's kind of that. And one of the ones, as I said, Greentown was where the Indiana Tumbler and Goblet Company started. And it took advantage of that gas. And in so when we talk about ITNG, as most EAPG collectors will talk about, it was started by a man named, or it was spearheaded by a man named DC Jenkins. And DC Jenkins was a man who had worked in glass factories his whole life. He grew up outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He got his start working in some of the factories there and learned the business so that he could go and run a factory like the one in Greentown. So I'm going to go through, and like I said, I'm going to talk a little bit about items that were made by Indiana Tumbler and Goblet Company. I'll talk a little bit about the National Glass Company and what was made during their tenure within the factory. So that's kind of what I'm going to cover. This is by no means a totality of everything that they made in Greentown. They made some really nice, beautiful glass there. So the Indiana Tumbler and Goblet Company, as a standalone factory, operated from 1894 to 1899. And like I said, I'm not going to talk. I'm not. I don't have hundreds of pieces in my collection. I have, well, maybe I do, but it's not as extensive as some other collectors have. So I'm gonna give you a very brief surface level here. Because we can talk right here. If we start at the picture on the left, that is a pattern that was just called number 29 by the company. Collectors call it shuttle or hearts of Loch Leven. I hear it more typically as shuttle. I don't hear too many people say hearts of Loch Leven. So, but it was a pretty extensive line. They had many more pieces than what you see here. I've got a tall creamer, a tumbler. I've got a wine and a cordial. They made it in a variety of colors, and that's one of the things that ITNG really started off with right out of the gate was they produced some really beautiful colors. Now, I will make a note that the two pieces in the shuttle in the back, the creamer and the tumbler, those are done in chocolate glass. I'll get to that in a little bit here. But still, they were well known for their colors. The picture on the far right, that is a parfait in pattern number 140. And when they advertised this pattern, they did call it Columbia. Collectors, before that name was found, referred to it as herringbone buttress. And again, that's a rather big, extensive line. I did not dig out of tubs all the pieces that I have. I've got a creamer and sugar in this pattern. I've got bowls. I've got plates. It was a nice, extensive line. The picture in the middle of that picture is the only piece they made in that line, and it's line number 101. And collectors typically refer to it as ruffled eye. So as you can see there, it's got that circle with the ruffle around it with flowers and leaves in between it. But I have it in that nice amber color. You can find it in quite a few different colors. I would love to find more colors. It's not um, something that's easy to find. So, like I said, those are just three to start off with that were done initially between those. These two are very interesting, these next two. They both were made in honor of Admiral Dewey after his success during the Spanish-American War. And the two pieces on the right, the busts of Admiral Dewey, would typically be found if you can find them. They're very difficult to find. They're a cover for a small ribbed dish, which the company did use that for. They had an actual lid that went with it, but they took the lid out and would put these on them. All I have is the tops, the busts themselves. I wish I had the dish to go under them, but I just don't. Um, then this next pattern on the right, that is what the company, they did not give it a line number or anything. They called it the Dewey pattern. Um, some collectors call it like scalloped flower flange or something. I don't know. I've always had heard it referred to as Dewey. And it really has nothing to do. There's nothing that makes you think of Admiral Dewey, but that was uh, the way that they honored him. This was a very extensive line with, as you see here, cream or sugar, butter dish. There's another parfait in the back. There are pitchers and plates and bowls. It was a nice big line that they did. Um, so that is one that you could possibly find out and about. That's one that seems to be located in lots of places. It had a much bigger distribution than some of their patterns. Um, this is another pattern that you can also find. This was another one. It is line number 200, but it is also, they also advertised it as the Austrian line. And this is very indicative of, many people say that, pressed EAPG glass was an attempt to make cut glass or cut glass in appearance for the masses because cut glass was very expensive even at the time it was made. But this is a very extensive line. It is most commonly found in crystal, as you can see by the little cordial in the first picture. It was made in canary. I've got a piece on the next slide that you'll see that isn't chocolate, but it had pitchers and tumblers and wines and salt shakers as from the middle picture, and then it had several. I'm not sure. Advanced collectors can probably tell you. I'm not sure how many sugars and creamers and size wise they had, but you see, I've got two different sizes here. Um, I hate to venture to say that the small ones were children's pieces, but possible. Then they did vases and rose bowls, and I've got three sizes of vases. I've got a rose bowl here. Oh, no. Ah, hold on. I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay. So there's the Austrian pattern. Like I said, you can find this quite frequently. There are some, you have to be careful. There are some that it can be confused with, and I catch myself every once in a while picking up a piece and looking at it and saying, "Oh, no, that's not Austrian," and I can't think of what it is. Oh well. All right. All right. These are just some pieces that are indicative of what was made when it was a standalone company. Now, many of these pieces were continued after 1889 when it joined the National Glass Combine, as it was referred to. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with the history of that. In 1899, several glass companies, the leadership of them got together and decided to try working together to better utilize their resources. They formed the National Glass Company in 1899. And sadly, some of the companies were closed outright. Like there was one close to Greentown, in Summitville, the Central Glass Company. As soon as the National Glass Company acquired it, they shut it down and they sent molds here, there, and everywhere, and so that was it. What's interesting about this, as I mentioned, DC Jenkins, he went on to become, he left Greentown and went to work with the National Glass Company in their upper management and worked there. But when they joined the National Glass Company, they brought in a man named Jacob Rosenthal. And he really is one that worked with finding different colors of glass. And as you see right here, this is, sorry, this is pattern number 350. Collectors typically refer to it as cactus, although Phyllis, one of the other names is paneled agave, which it does look like an agave more than a cactus. But this was one of the patterns that they used the chocolate glass that Jacob Rosenthal developed the formula for at when he worked at Greentown, and was put into place with this pattern. You find a lot of cactus in chocolate, and it is one that if you're out and about, you might find it. um, and I will point out, and again, I'm not an expert. I got this one by chance. The So I've got in the picture on the left, there's a covered creamer on the left side of that picture. On the right side of that picture is another creamer without a lid. And if you see, there's much more of an amber color. Greentown collectors typically refer to this as red agate. And they look for this kind of piece. I got lucky, found this one on eBay. I didn't pay a lot for it because it's a damaged piece. There's a big chunk that was broken out of the spout on the creamer and they glued it back together. I knew that when I bought it. But I also want to point out that there was really a variation in the way the color for chocolate glass came out. You see the compote here in the picture on the left has a really nice dark color to it. But if you look at the mug and the tumbler in the right-hand picture, they're much lighter, creamier color of chocolate. The red agate came about because of the heating of the glass when it was in the mold. Um, so, like I said, wasn't always the most consistent, but it still is very interesting in what you have and find. Um, this is another pattern. This is actually one of my favorites. This is the number 350 pattern, and they did actually give it a name. They gave it the name of Indiana. And most collectors refer to it as cord drapery. because if you look at it, the design is very similar to the cords and the tassels that you would see on drapery at that time period. So this is one that it's typically found in crystal, but you can find the syrup jug in the picture on the left. That can be found in chocolate. To my knowledge, that's the only piece that can be found in. It can be found quite frequently in chocolate. Um, in the right hand picture, you see a ruffled bowl in amber, and those are that I've got examples of that in their emerald green color, in cobalt. So that's a piece that you can find different colors in. Um, okay, this is when we look at these right here. Um, Leaf bracket and or the picture on the left is number 400, typically referred to as leaf bracket. Um, it is one leaf bracket and cactus were probably the first two patterns that were produced heavily in chocolate glass. Um, and oh, I should have written this down because I can't remember the date. There was a World's Fair about 1901, I think, in Buffalo, and the National Glass Company set up a booth there, and they had pieces of chocolate glass, and they would etch it with World's Fair on it. And there are people who have really nice collections. Sadly, I don't have any of those pieces, but this was an extensive line with bowls and plates and sugars and creamers and lots of different pieces. Um, but again, you also see the variation in the chocolate color here. Um, so especially in the shakers right here. Um, so the picture on the right shows some examples of pattern number 140, which collectors typically refer to as teardrop and tassel. So you see the teardrop right here, and then they're down on they've got tassels here, and so interesting um, pattern, not one I see very often. I don't have many more pieces than these right here. I don't know that I have any other pieces in this pattern. Um, but still, nice, a nice little pattern. This right here, this specifically, let's talk about this color. Um, this is pattern number 450. Collectors refer to it as holly or holly amber because it was made in this kind of color. And this is what they refer to as a heat reactive glass. Again, it depends on how thick the glass is and how it's heated when it's in the mold and in the annealing oven. And you end up, and you see it with the mug here, the two rings have an almost opaque white to them. You can see it here in the sauce bowl. Um, that that's what they refer to when they say holly amber. This is the color that they look for. And like I said, it was the way that the glass was heated and things like that that gave it this white opaque color. As you see, it's much better on the rim of the sauce bowl, not as much at the base of the mug, but up here at the top, um, it's a little better. Um, but you see, I've got a piece in crystal. So you typically find it in the amber color, but not always. And this is something that you need deep pockets. If you're going to get a really good piece in this pattern, you're going to pay a good bit of money for it. This sauce bowl, if it were in mint condition, I bought this. I've had this one, oh, almost 20 years. And one of the little beads at the top is broken. I can't, or no, there's a little dip on the far side over here. That's what it is, where the piece just kind of slipped. Well, that's considered not mint, so I got it for a good price. A lot of times you will see these starting at $75 or more. Um, and it's just a small sauce bowl. I mean, like 6 inches across. No, not even 6 inches across. That mug, I probably paid 75 to $100 for it. And it's maybe 6, 7 inches tall. It's not a big piece. So the holly amber color is really very, people like this. They collect it. They have, oh, big, tall footed compotes and butter dishes and things that are just really, and you're going to spend $500 or more on pieces like that. So, um, and this was introduced right at the very end, or the very end of 1902, beginning of 1903, and that's important, and I'll get to that in a minute. As we get closer to the spring of 1903, there was, Jacob Rosenthal began developing another color, which was collectors call rose agate. And it was a soft pink color, again, with the white opaque thickness here. And I'm not sure how many pieces there actually are in rose agate. They had developed a strawberry pattern, which where they have the holly leaves and holly berries right here in the middle. It had strawberries. I know there's one piece in the museum in Greentown, and I think they paid $25,000 for that bowl. um, so they were beginning to look at different colors at that point in time. And I'll get to why they didn't continue that in a minute. In the National Glass era, they also had designers who tried different things, such as these salts right here, the wheelbarrows right here. And I should point out that one of the wheelbarrows here and the creamer down in the lower right corner, that's a color that collectors refer to as Nile green. They found a catalog for the factory that listed this as either apple green or lettuce green, depending on how dark green it was. But that's another unique color that Jacob Rosenthal helped develop there in Greentown. But again, you've got the number 403 wheelbarrow, the salt. I'll talk about these pictures on the right in a minute. Go back to this creamer here. Again, this is the indoor drinking scene, and they made several different pieces in it. This is the only piece that I have. And these are actually the only two pieces that I have in the opaque green color. And then these over here, the picture on the bottom left, that is from left to right. That's the number 63 tumbler. Collectors typically refer to it as sawtooth. You can find those out and about. I think with some regularity. I see them occasionally. The one on the right is the number 140 mug. The one in the middle is very interesting. It is the Unita Milk Biscuit tumbler. And it was an advertising piece. And It was made for, didn't write this note down. I believe it's the National Biscuit Company, and which we know now as Nabisco. And this was sent out by the company to use for people to scoop up crackers, biscuits, cookies, whatever you want to call them at the time. So you need a milk biscuit. So it was an advertising piece. And you can find these around. They're not too terribly only made in chocolate glass. The pictures in the upper right corner, the racing deer and the squirrel, those were not originally made in Greentown. They were made at a factory in Findlay, Ohio, the Dalzell Gilmore factory, I believe it was. That's where that mold was developed. But when both companies joined the National Glass Company, the company started moving molds around. These were two of the molds that they moved from Findlay over to Greentown. And so when they were produced in chocolate, they were done in Greentown. And they can kind of prove that because there have been several excavations on the factory site where they found cullet, the broken shards of various pieces, and they've been able to put them together or figure out where they came from and what they were. And shards of both the racing deer and the squirrel picture have been found on the factory site in Greentown, so they know that it was made there. Um, One other thing that at this point in time that they were known for making were their covered dishes in the form of animals. Um, and the top one is one I'll talk about a little bit here. The the company referred to them as dolphin fish. Typically, they would be used to hold anything like mustard, things like that, condiments that you would have on your table. There are three different styles that you see here. The one in the middle is referred to as the sawtooth. It is the most common one. As you see, you can find them in chocolate. You can also find them in other colors. I've got a crystal sawtooth. Sadly, I don't have the lid. But there are several different colors that you can find them in. But the sawtooth dolphin has become kind of the symbol for Greentown glass, and they use it with some of there's a national collecting organization, the National Greentown Glass Association, and they use it quite heavily on their website and things like that. Um, the one on the left has a beaded rim. It doesn't have a sawtooth right here. It's just a beaded rim all the way around. And this one on the right is a smooth rim. These two are not as easy to find as the sawtooth. But again, nice pieces to have. These are the two, sadly, the only two animal dish covered dishes that I have. They've got chicken on a nest and rabbit on a nest. Again, made in a nice amber color. They're darker green color, not typically the Depression era green that you'd see, almost an emerald. Um, and they did others. You can find there's a bird on a nest. The one that is really every collector wants is one that's referred to as fighting cocks. And it's two roosters, beak to beak. It looks like they're getting ready to fight. And that's the handle of the top. And that's the one that collectors really want. Um, and then these are what the company referred to as the 7-ounce basket. Well, it's a cat on a hamper. is what collectors call it. And I've got one here in their nice light blue color and in chocolate glass. And you see the ears kind of have that red agate appearance to them. Um, but again, nice pieces to have in any collection. Okay, as as I mentioned, with the racing deer and the squirrel pictures, the National Glass Company moved molds around from factory to factory. They also moved glass formulas around. So because the factory in Greentown was part of the National Glass Company, they used it at other factories, the chocolate recipe. So that is why right here on the left, I've got a sugar. Sadly, I don't have the lid and the creamer in the Geneva pattern that was made at the McKeon Brothers factory. And then that was outside of Pittsburgh. And then here on the right, this is a celery vase in pattern number 143, Fleur de Lis, but it was made at the Royal Factory in Marietta, Ohio. So, and you can find chocolate at other factories. I don't have much in terms of this. And there were, like I said, McKeon Brothers did several things with it. So did Royal. I will say that one after 1903, well, I guess I should say this now. In June of 1903, there was a fire at the Greentown factory, and the National Glass Company, the factory was destroyed, and National Glass Company decided not to rebuild. So that was kind of the end of glass manufacturing in Greentown. But Jacob Rosenthal, when we go back, and I can never remember what his exact title was, he ended up working at the Fenton factory when it first opened. And so he took the chocolate recipe with him. That's why you have Fenton pieces that are made of chocolate glass. And Fenton was still using the chocolate formula right up until almost they closed. I don't know how long. I've got a vase that was made probably up to 2000. So you can find chocolate pieces in that, in Fenton. All right. So let's talk a little bit about resources because this is what helps me the most. As I said, I'm not an what would be considered an advanced collector by any stretch of the imagination. I still have to, if I'm going to go out glass shopping, I'm taking two of these books for sure, probably the third one as well, and we'll talk about it. First of all, one of the best resources is the National Greentown Glass Association. There's their URL, greentownglass.org. Really, it's a very good resource. And I don't know, I know Phyllis is familiar with the Early American Pattern Glass Society's database. Um, they have a really good database that has pictures, hundreds, maybe thousands of pictures of glass. Um, so you can use that as a resource. But these three books were all put together by the National Greentown Glass Association. This first one right here by itself, the blue book, Greentown Glass, a Collector's Guide. Yes, a group of collectors of Greentown Glass sat and wrote the actual book. It was all edited by James Mazzell. So he's been very influential in Greentown Glass and the collecting of it. Um, the picture on the far right in the top corner, that is a guide to reproductions. I'll talk about reproductions in a minute. That's something you need to have. And then below it is a price guide that the club put out, as you see, in 2010. So the prices are probably not exactly current, but it's a good place to start. So let's go back to reproductions. Greentown Glass has been a very popular collecting for enough years that companies began to recreate pieces. So as you can see here from the cover of the book, they've done that cat on a hamper. One of those is a real one and one is a reproduction. And reproductions were made by like the St. Clair Glass Company out of Indiana that was open for years. Fenton has done some. Fenton has they used a lot of their own patterns, but they also did some. Other companies have been trying to reproduce chocolate glass and things like that. You just have to know what it is. I don't know that. That's why I have that book, and it's perfect. The other one there is a toothpick, the old woman toothpick holder. Again, one of those is an original in their Nile green color, and one is a reproduction. And there, the book is very good about showing you what to look for in it. So for somebody like me, who, as I like to say, I know enough to be dangerous, if I didn't have that book, I would probably come home with way more reproductions than I would like. Because I see things out and I'm like, ooh, I think that's a Greentown piece. Let me get my book out and see if it was reproduced. So it's helped me out a lot. Like I said, you need to be aware of reproductions. And I will say that some of them are really pretty easy to tell, like the cactus pattern. Fenton made the cactus pattern. I'm not, they made it, but typically the one that everybody like is their canary opalescent, but they did it in the 1950s. But so they recreated the molds and remade it. They made it in a color that it was never originally made in, but there are certainly collectors who look for that yellow or that canary opalescent cactus made by Fenton. You need to know what you're looking at. Because, like I said, I would have certainly, if I hadn't had that book, I would have certainly probably picked it up. And I believe you can get copies of all these books from the Greentown Glass Association. I will say that they do have a very nice museum in downtown Greentown. I've been there quite a few times. As I said, the organization ended up with that one rose agate strawberry bowl. It's there at the museum. I've been there to see it. It's a beautiful piece. They have a really nice small museum there that is certainly worth the drive if you're ever driving through Indiana. So, like I said, that's kind of what I have here today. Like I said, just kind of an introduction. I think Greentown Glass is fascinating. I certainly don't know it all, but that's kind of what I know. And I want to point out, use your resources. Don't base anything on what I said. Use your resources to help you out. So, all right. So I will open it up. Any questions?
I'd like to just make a comment. I am totally surprised at how much chocolate glass there obviously is available. I don't see it as much as I guess other people do. So I was surprised,
Well, and
pleasantly surprised.
I will say something because I don't know if you realized this, Phyllis. Max Miller, who is a well-respected antique glass dealer in Houston, Texas. Um, and Max is from Greentown originally. He still has family there. So he goes back and I've gotten Greentown from Max, and it's really, he, he knows his stuff too. So, so if you go to Max's shop on the west side of Houston,
Right.
you'll see some. So,
But he normally doesn't bring it to the show.
no,
Just
he doesn't. You're right.
no. So I was just very pleasantly surprised to see all the different pieces.
Yeah.
That was good.
Like I said, I don't know how big of a distribution area they really had. Like I said, I do see pieces down here in Tennessee, so I don't know what other people may see in other parts of the country, or I don't know if it made it into Canada. So, anything else?
I just wanted to say that a couple of my friends grew up in Greentown, and one of them, their father, when he was a little boy, probably the late 40s or the early 50s, he would dig, or he and the kids in the town, they would dig up the glass by the old factory, and she has a bunch of the glass there, shards of things, and then what you were calling, we call it slag glass, but you're calling cullet. I don't know what the real name is, but just big chunks of the like
Mhm.
chocolate glass and stuff.
And that brings up another point because there were people, and I don't know if they did this for other companies, but there were people who went and were digging up those shards there in Greentown, and they made mosaics out of it and made pictures. So you see those every once in a while. I had one. Sadly, as it was mailed to me, it all fell apart in the mail. And I certainly wasn't going to try to put it back together. That's a puzzle I was not going to try. So I've just got a bag of shards now. But yeah. So yeah, that was a little interesting. There were people in the Greentown area who did. They would make mosaics more or less, out of the glass that they found on the factory site. Anything else? Any other questions?
So how do you tell the difference between St. Clair's dolphin dish with a cover as opposed to the U.S. glass dolphin dish with a cover?
Okay. As I understand it, a lot of it has to do, first of all, with the lid. If the lid
Okay.
is smooth, it is not a reproduction. It is a real one. If it is kind of got a rough, pebbled-like surface, that's a reproduction. And I
Okay.
think I've put my book away. The other thing is with the original, the opening that you would put the mustard, the condiment, what have you, inside the piece, the base goes back much further into the tail of the original, whereas with some of the reproductions, it just goes straight down.
Okay.
And there is also, you can count the number of teeth on a sawtooth because the sawtooth is the one that has been reproduced. The to my knowledge, the beaded lip and the smooth lip have not been reproduced. It's always the sawtooth, and you have to
That's
count the number of teeth. If you do you want me to get my book out and
that's
see for sure?
No, you explained it pretty much, and it's like when I run across them again, I know the difference now, and I know what to look for. But that's the piece that I see quite a bit here in Wisconsin and in Minnesota. But I always see the St. Clair piece, it seems like, because I've had three of them, and all of them have been turned out to be reproductions,
Right.
according to what friends say, but they're no experts either. So it's like, oh, okay, it's like now I know for sure.
And I haven't looked on since I have the book, I haven't looked on their website. I think the Greentown Glass Association's website might talk about reproductions and how to look at them. That might be worth checking out. Like I said, I haven't looked at it recently because I've got the book, and if I'm going out shopping, I'm taking the book
Right.
with me.
Right. It's kind of hard to take a laptop with you or look on the phone and go, oh, okay.
Right, right.
I don't like looking things up on the phone as I'm out shopping. I would much rather page through a book, back out in the car for a little bit, and then run back in and go, yep, it's what I want. My
So, um, okay. So yeah, it's like I said, for me, because I have an interest in Greentown, I use the books quite a bit. And again, the EAPG Society's website is really very good. I know Phyllis uses it. I think Gwinnell uses it too, don't you? Yeah.
Yes.
So they've done a very nice job, and honestly, the pictures that they're using, the majority of them have come through their Facebook group. So you post a picture
right.
up there, and they'll put it in the database if they don't have it. So it's
Yeah. I've I've had a few pieces that they've asked for better pictures of because they didn't have it.
right.
And my biggest problem with that site is it's so huge, and I think I know what I'm looking for, and it's not. It's like, oh, I call it this, and no, it's actually that, and it's takes forever to find it, but it's a great resource if
Yeah,
you're into the
it is.
EAPG. Yeah,
So, but so there we go. Like I said, that's an introduction to Greentown Glass, and that's my knowledge of it, and I don't claim to be an expert, but like I said, I certainly have fun looking for it. I don't often find it or see it around here. I'm trying to think of the last piece that I actually bought. It's been a while since I've bought a piece. I will tell you that the cat on the hamper that I have is actually the second one. Well, kind of, sorta. Um, I found one at NDGA's convention in Tiffin, the first one, which was 2017, I believe. And we had it. There was a dealer there who had it. I bought it from him. It was slightly damaged, so I didn't pay the over $100 price for it. And then I was lucky enough, we moved here to Tennessee, and there was an antique store, and all they had was vintage and antique glassware. They did not have any other kind. And it was in a small town um, called Irwin, Tennessee, over close to the North Carolina border. It was one of the towns, I don't know if you remember when Helene hit Western North Carolina, Eastern Tennessee, they showed the Unicoi County Hospital being flooded out, and they had to get patients out and staff out and everything off of the roof. That's in Irwin. So I don't know if the shop is still there, if it survived, but I went there soon after we moved here, and they had on a cat on a hamper for like $20. And I knew it was original. I had my book with me. And I bought it, and I can't remember. One of the bases was in great shape, and the other one was not, had a little chip here and there. And the same thing with the lid, but they weren't together. So I pieced my nice set together that you saw a picture of, and I've got a second
Yeah,
one
yeah.
that's got some problems with it, but still, it's a nice original piece. So
I've done that with a few pieces. It's like
yeah,
I don't mind buying a damaged one if I know I've got a good part of it sitting at home. It's like, okay, hopefully the part that I'm looking for is not the damaged part, so I have two damaged pieces. But
right, right.
my biggest problem is I never remember which one is the damaged piece. So there's times where it's like, yep, okay, now I've got two of them that are shelf sitters as opposed to being out proudly displayed. But I
Right.
see a lot of the chocolate glass in Wisconsin and Minnesota. I don't see any of the other colors of the patterns. I
Okay.
mean, chocolate glass must have been very professional.
Yeah,
Must have been their biggest moneymaker.
I think at that time, yes, they did put a lot of into it. Like I said, they brought out two new patterns to really focus on that, the cactus and the leaf bracket. You do find that in other colors, but not a lot. Um,
Uh,
so the chocolate pieces, it was majority made in chocolate, and there are some other patterns that I don't have that were the same thing. So yeah, they chocolate was popular for whatever reason, and they took advantage of it, and they made a lot of it. So
well, I found this to be very informative because I didn't know they made it in any other colors than in clear. I thought they only just made chocolate glass because, like I said, that's all I ever see.
no, like I said, they made. I wish I had. Those are the only two pieces of holly amber that I have. I would love to have more of that. I just can't pay. I mean, some of the big, tall footed compotes that they have with a lid, those can sell for $1,000 or more. I don't have that kind of
I've
money.
seen some astronomical, right? I've seen some astronomical prices on some of the chocolate glass and some of the pieces, and it's like, it's pretty, but you know, not even going to give it some serious thought because it's not my pocketbook. It's not within my budget.
Right. Well,
It's
like
called,
the leaf bracket pitcher and tumbler that I have, I actually bought
right.
that and six tumblers at there's a really nice antique store in Greentown, and I bought it there. And I think I paid about 250 for the whole set. And I thought
Uh,
that was
uh,
kind of a
uh,
reasonable price for it. So
right. Yeah. I don't mind spending money on sets, but it's like some of the prices I see on things where what they are to me, it's like, okay, it's beautiful. It's worth taking a picture of some and putting it in your mind that it's like, yes, this belongs to this company. But no, it's just price
yeah,
wise, it's like, no, somebody else will be overly enjoyed and happy to get it. But I'm just enjoying looking at it as I see it right now. Because uh, it seems like no matter how deep I think my pocketbooks are, I always get attracted to the pieces that are deeper than my pocketbooks.
right. Well, I think that's everybody, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But
Dean, do
that
you
just
know?
makes it,
Oh,
or go ahead.
I was going to say, Dean, do you know right off if the Dewey pattern was reproduced?
Yes, it was. Pieces were
Okay.
reproduced by Imperial and in
Oh,
the 50s.
okay.
And
Interesting.
I think most of those have an IG mark on the bottom.
Okay.
Thought the IG mark wasn't used until the 60s, though,
Like I said,
for Imperial.
okay, hold on. Let me grab my book. I know where it is.
I'm sorry about that, but
Well, I should have left it
at
out here
least
on
he
my
knows where it
desk.
is.
Well, because the picture that was in today's event was this one because it was, as far as I knew, the only piece that I have, but I wasn't sure if it was ever reproduced once you said they were
Not in
restocked.
chocolate.
Oh, not in chocolate. So this is
That
okay. So
should
to
be
answer your
original.
question, it did make its way to Canada at some point because I bought this near Calgary a few years ago, and there were two of them. two sugars without lids that were sitting there, and I didn't know anything about it other than that I think I knew enough at that point to know what chocolate glass was, and I was like, oh, I've never seen chocolate glass in the wild anywhere. I should get it, and it wasn't very much.
Oh, you are right. It was Imperial in the 60s. And it was
Okay.
made up through the 80s when Imperial closed.
Okay.
And it was just the large covered butter dish. They had two different sizes of butter dish. I showed a chocolate butter dish that I actually bought from Max Miller.
Right.
Um, that's the small one, and there's a bigger one. And the large one is the one that was reproduced. And it was
Okay.
done. They made it in amber and crystal, as well as fern green and verd.
Okay. So what's the difference between the fern green and the verd color? Because the verd is also their green color. Is that just a darker
Yeah,
green?
all this says is fern green is not as dark as Greentown's emerald green. That's all it says.
Okay. Okay. 'Cause, I mean,
And it says, at times over the years, some colors or bases may have an imperial logo, IG, LIG, or ALIG, while
right,
others are
right.
not
That's
marked.
depending
So,
on when, right. It all
um,
depends on when Lennox took it over and everybody else, you know.
yeah, there are drawings here that show what's authentic, what's not. It's just that large butter dish that was reproduced. So no, your chocolate sugar there is original.
That's exciting.
And can you show the cover of that book again?
No, I know
Okay.
it's background
Okay.
or backwards.
All right.
So yeah, they've done a nice job with that book, and it has very detailed drawings that show what a reproduction is, or what's correct about an original and what mistake was made with the reproduction, and they've done a nice job with the book. So
And you can get that through the association, right?
I think you can, yes. I know you can buy it at the museum. I bet if you contact them, they
All
would.
right. Well, it should be easy enough to find. It's out of print, but there's probably still enough copies of it floating around.
I would think so. And like I said, they sell it at the museum. If you want to call up or see if the museum, I think it has a telephone number.
Okay. I can look that up and find that out, you know. Not that I need another book in my collection that I can't find when I'm looking for it, but you know, that's
You
how it
can
usually
never have
goes
too
with
many
most of us
books.
glass folks.
I was just
That's
saying,
what I say too, but my biggest problem is I don't have a shelf big enough to put them all in one spot. So it's like, okay, depending on what it gets used lately, might be sitting out or it might be in one of the 5 stacks that are stacked up in different places because, like I said, I don't have enough room to put everything on one shelf, you know, or
we'll see.
on one.
Daniel, are those all your glass books behind you?
They are actually, and I just gave away or I donated probably 20 of the Florence books because I decided, I'm just going to keep the last one that he
Right.
did on each of the different ones. But yeah, those are a lot of those are glass books.
Uh, I
Yeah,
don't know. I
I've got
like
it.
keeping some of his because there's some pictures like a friend of mine collects buttons and bows, and she didn't quite understand what was meant by the fact that the bases for the sherbets are two different styles. And I was going through a book one day, and it's like, oh well, I have this picture that shows all the different sherbets and all the different foots. And she goes, where did you find that picture at? So she was out looking for the book for that one because that's not in the book that she has that has her buttons and bows in it. It was like, okay. So every time I think about getting rid of all the old copies, it's like, no, every once in a while I have to pull out one of the older ones just to see if it's what it is. 'Cause,
Well,
He did
yeah.
that with his books. He put different things in different editions. So you almost have to have every
right.
edition.
Yeah, because I mean, it's the only glass book one I had was the 6th edition, and then a friend wanted the 11th edition, and I happened to find 2 copies of it, so I bought both copies and gave her one, and I was going through it, and it's like, wow, this is really weird and totally different than
Mhm.
5 editions earlier that I have, but you can't have every book that's out there on collecting glass. It would be nice, but uh, you know.
Yeah, I know. I've
The
have a
sad thing is, I
bookshelf in
tried to give
here.
my old one, right. I tried to give some of my old ones to the local library here, and they weren't interested in it at all. It's like, no, it's not sports cards and it's not coins, and that's the only thing that they wanted in their reference material book. And it's like, it's such a shame because there's so much knowledge and there's so much glass out there that's just in my area, depression glass or old glass, if it's over $5, it just sits. Nobody wants it, except for me, which is a shame. Or a
Well,
good thing because I find some fantastic pieces,
the NDGA's museum in Wellington, we have we have a nice library. We've actually there are 2 sections. There's one out that people can sit and research on, and there's a big table there that they can sit at. There's also one back, they've got another one that's only for staff use, the volunteers to look for reference, things like that. They've still
Right,
got a
right.
bunch that they're selling in the gift shop.
Uh, 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 yeah.
So,
Does anyone have show and tell for today?
Of course,
Daniel, you said you did.
Of course.
I've got a Heisey Twist
oh,
ice bucket that's got a unknown cutting on it. This cutting can be found on a lot of Heisey Twist patterns, but the company has never known who did it. I don't know if you can see it. Let's see if I do it this way. Does it show up? Don't have the right background lighting. No, but anyhow, it's like wheat things, and then there's like little flowers in between each one of them, and it's just a lovely piece. When I found it and first showed it to the Hazy Club members, I had about 15 people email me. It's like, is that piece for sale? It's like, no, that piece is not for sale. At least it wasn't because I had it for like 10 minutes before all these friends wanted to buy it. And it's like, no, let me at least enjoy it for a little bit. And well, that was 9 years ago, and I'm still enjoying it every minute of it. So every once in a while, some of them will ask me, say, well, when are you going to sell that? And it's like, when I get tired of it or find something to take its place. And, but, and then the other thing that I found is a half-pound recessed panel cookie jar. But there's there's tons of things that I have, but I'm not going to take up the entire time to show because, like as I was telling Daniel, I just bought out an estate that had 50 boxes of depression glass in it, and it's rather disgusting. Or it's actually nice that friends know that I collect and sell depression glass because a lot of them around here, grandma's getting rid of them or moving into assisted living, and she doesn't want to send it to auction because she doesn't want 10 cents on the dollar for it, but she will take like $1 a piece for it. I mean, I come home probably once a month and I'll find 15 or 20 boxes on the front porch that somebody has dropped off that says, Grandma said you have to have this. It's like, go through it and sell. I usually I'll give them back half of whatever I sell it for just because I'm not being greedy, and if I don't do that, my sources will dry up. So but it's kind of fun, but it's friends say, well, you're never going to use your dining room table. And it's like, well, I did last Christmas, because that was the last time that it was cleared. But oh, anybody else got anything?
Yeah. Okay. I was at a local charity shop the other day, and I have a very small collection of Duncan Canterbury, just because I think it's a nice
Okay.
pattern that goes with everything. And I
Right.
didn't need this, of course, but it's a candle holder. But what I was interested in, and I don't know if this is going to show up at all, but it's the etching on the bottom,
No.
Oh. Mhm.
That's
which
cool.
is some kind of a flower, and I cannot figure out what it is. But the second one, it's exactly the same flower, but it's slightly different, covers a different part of the glass. So what I did was talk about getting out the books. I think I have either 6 or 7 books on Duncan. So I got them out and I was trying to figure out what this etching is. And so I started writing down everything that I was finding. There's no one source that gives you all the etchings and all the cuttings and things like that.
Right.
But I wrote down, let's see, 12 cuttings and 11 etchings. And then I found a statement that said there were probably at least 35 different etchings. And I'm like, okay, I
Right.
give up.
Yeah.
So this
I
one
know
will
how that
go
goes.
with 2 other ones that I have, exactly the same candle holder, but different etchings on the bottom. So it was just a fun thing. And the funny thing was when we took a donation over to the charity, and then I went into the little shop, which is mostly clothing, but they have one little section of household things. Never find anything. So found these and went to buy them. And the woman said, well, it's half price day. And I'm like, well, that's even better.
That's even better. Yeah.
That's even better. So I take donations in the back and then go and buy something in the front. It's like a little game.
Well, you got to have space in the car for the thing you're going to bring home, because you just took space out of the car dropping things off. So,
that's right. So
I do that too. I'll drop things off at the thrift store, and it's like I go in one door to drop it off, and I'll walk through, and I see my coming out. It's like, okay, I came out with almost as much as I dropped off. So, I mean, I should have just kept it. But,
luckily, I dropped off more than I brought home. So,
well,
yeah, that was good. That's all I have.
All right. I found a cream and sugar, and I believe it's a tiffin, and it's satin on the lower half with a engraving around the rim.
That's pretty.
It is.
That
is
nice. I like.
Beautiful condition. It came out of Florida, made its way eventually to Dallas, ended up back in Georgia before it finally got back to Texas. It took over a month for it to arrive. But it was an interesting experience, but it came in good shape. I expected it to be shattered, but it wasn't. It was nice shape.
I can understand that. Yeah.
All right, so I did some shopping. This is Indiana's number 1007. People typically call it lotus blossom. What's interesting about this is the green stain that they've done. This is from the late 40s, early 50s. I don't typically, I see these without the stain quite frequently. This is the first one I've ever seen with the stain, and it's in fantastic shape. I mean, and it was, I bought it at, we drove back from seeing my mom in Indiana, and we stopped in Madison, Indiana, which is on the Ohio River between Louisville and Cincinnati. And went into the shop, and it was 25% off, I think. And I was like, oh, even better. But it started out at $15. And I'm like, okay, I
Yeah,
like
I
this.
got it.
I like this.
I found a pair of Heisey Windsor candlesticks in the thrift store that they had it marked at $5 for the pair. I brought it up to the counter and she says, oh, it's 50% off day, and you're also a senior citizen, so you get an extra 10% off. So it's like they came home with literally next to nothing. And it was like, this is great because, it's a thrift shop I very rarely ever go to because they usually just have garbage from 2000 as far as glassware wise. They don't usually have anything old, but they're starting to open up a vintage room, and evidently they've just got a horde of stuff in the back room, but they don't have anybody that knows how to price it. So it's like, okay. They've asked me to volunteer to come in and help with the pricing just because they have no clue of what it is or what it might be worth and this and that. So I'm kind of looking forward to that next week. It should be kind of fun. And the best thing is, she said, if you find anything that you like, you can buy it. You can't price it, but you can tell us what it's worth, and we'll mark it down to the point where it makes it worth your while to buy it. And it's like, that's even a little more incentive to do it,
Yeah.
maybe,
Yeah.
but
So Wesley, you
it
didn't
should
have
be quite
anything?
fun.
I do. I've been looking for a Scotty dog picture forever. Um,
Ooh,
in the wild, of course. I don't want to have to officially. So I finally found it about a month ago in my thrifting adventures in Edmonton. And it's the star pattern, of course, federal.
Oh,
But has
that's
the
pretty.
Scotty dogs on it. It was only $6, so even better.
Can't
And
complain about that.
I had a star picture. It's on my windowsill in the kitchen, um, just a plain one there, and it's next to a cocktail set that I think goes by the name Bellhop. It has little Dachshund hounds on it that I found a few years ago, and so now all the dogs are together on the kitchen windowsill. So I swapped it out for the plain one. So that's my most exciting. And then the other one that was interesting that I'd never seen before is also from Federal, this cloverleaf dish, and I've never seen one with an advertisement at the center. And this is for Lambert Gardens in Portland, which I've never been to Portland, but yeah, I've never seen it with an
That's pretty.
advertisement before, so I had to pick that one up. It's just a few dollars also at the thrift store.
That's interesting. I like
It's
those
always fun to
advertising
find
pieces.
advertising pieces.
Yeah, I'm quite often drawn to the advertising pieces, especially when they're like for a souvenir from somewhere. So yeah, quite like that. Apparently, this closed in the '60s, so yeah, this Lambert Gardens. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Daniel, you don't have
I think
anything?
I have one of, I'm sorry.
oh, go ahead, Phyllis.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think I have one of those, Wesley, that was from my mother, probably from the 60s, and amber color. But it
Okay.
doesn't have any advertising in the center.
Yeah, I have a plain clear one
But
that I've had
yeah,
for a while but then I saw, I'm like, oh, I've never seen one with an ad. It makes sense because it's a
yeah,
round circle right in the middle. Like it makes sense that it was used for that.
sure, sure. The amber is a pretty color too, though.
It must
In
be,
it.
yeah. I've never seen a color
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
I have, I'm almost done with Diana. I just have one more piece of Diana, and it'll come when it comes. But I've started my collection of Heisey Twist in Moon Gleam. So this is one of my first pieces that has the little ladle and everything. This is the mayonnaise. And I have a little mustard pot. And I have the comport. which this is really a pretty substantial piece. It's pretty big. But I think this one
Yeah, they
especially is
are.
going to be really useful. You know, you'll be able to use it for lots of different things.
See, the one of the things I look for in Twist are the footed sugar and creamer. I
Mm.
think those are just beautiful, and I've never seen one for sale before. I've just seen pictures.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's like what I'm learning is unlike Diana, there are sharp edges on Twist,
Mhm.
so it's kind of a little
Yep.
harder to
Yep.
buy and not get a damaged piece. So those footed pieces you're talking about, they've got those sharp edges, so I'm kind of careful to make sure, I'm always asking the people online, is it are there any chips or anything, and hoping they tell me the truth because those footed pieces are great, the whole set.
Uh, uh, I just bought a pyramid 4-part relish, and the lady said that it was full of chips, so she gave me a very good price on it. And when I got here, all the chips were just rough edges. There was no chips in it whatsoever. It was just how it comes out of the mold. I think Indiana is famous for having rough edges on some of their patterns just because of the way that they come out of the mold. But it's like I saw it and it's like she said, "Oh, I'll put tape on all the places that has got a chip on it," and there's like only maybe a fourth of an inch that wasn't covered in blue tape, and it's like, okay, this is a little bit more than what she said it was. And it's like I took out the tape, and it's like, no, there's no chips in it. It's all just a rough edge. I mean, if you wanted to be a perfectionist, you could take like a emery board to it and just smooth it out just a little bit because that's all that it is. It's not damaged in any way, shape, or form. But I mean, she only wanted $15 for it because she said it was so badly chipped up. And it's like, oh, for $15, it's a piece I've always wanted. I've always liked that pattern, and I've never been able to find it. So even if it's a damaged piece, I can knock it off the list of pieces that I'm looking for. So I was quite surprised when it came here, and it was like, whoa, okay, this is in a lot better shape than what she said it was.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I was quite happy with that.
All right. Well, just to let everybody know, our next Zoom will be on in May. What's the date? I can't remember off the top of my head. I do know we got to double check. It's hopefully going to be May 3rd on stretch glass. So we'll
That should be
yeah. Uh, um, Cal Hackerman is going to do it. We need to double check with him. He offered to do it. He couldn't do it today, but he said he could do it in May. So we're going to double check and make sure that. And then I'm going to start hitting up some people to do presentations. So hopefully we can have. I've got several people in mind. So, but okay. So thank you again for coming to the meeting. I certainly enjoyed this time. And so thank you again.
Thanks for presenting
Daniel,
for
if
us
you want to
today.
stay on, I'll give you my email address, and you can contact me about twist pieces. Because, like I said, I've got about 30 of the moongling that needs to find a new home. It needs to get out of its box because